Fellow Toastmasters and honored guests, for far longer than most of you have been alive, I had a deep-seated fear of public speaking. And it all began when I was 8 years old in Mrs. Gill's third grade class. She'd given us an assignment to read a book, and at the end of the week, to do an oral book report. And now, it was the end of the week. And I can recall her turning to me saying, "Don, if you would, please step to the front of the room and give us your report." Yes, Mrs. Gill. And as I began my long and arduous trek to the front of the room, my heart was pounding, my chest was tight, and I could barely breathe. And when I reached the front of the room and turned and faced my classmates, it happened. My brain froze and I couldn't remember a single thing that I wanted to say. And as I stood there like a deer in the headlights, my classmates started laughing at me. It was one of the most painful experiences in my young life. After what seemed like an eternity, Mrs. Gill said, "Don, you can take your seat." But by then the damage had already been done. And in that moment, the seed of a powerful limiting belief had been planted. And in the coming years, when it happened again and again, that seed took root. And from that moment, I made a decision that there was something wrong with me. I made a decision that I must have a defective brain. Why else would my brain let me down at such important moments in my life? And as a result of that decision, I made a commitment that I was going to avoid situations that would require me to speak. Fast forward to the year 2009. A friend of mine was getting married. He was a man I deeply respected, and he asked me to be the best man at his wedding. I was honored. And before I realized the full implication of my answer, I had already said yes. And it was only later that evening I realized that one of my responsibilities as his best man was to give a speech, the best man's toast. And with that realization, I started to panic, and my mind took me back to that painful experience in Mrs. Gill's third grade class. I knew my mind was not to be trusted, and I made a decision that I was going to write out my speech, and when it came time, I would read it. I didn't want to do it, but I felt that was the only way I was likely to get through it. When the time came and the disc jockey handed me the microphone, I took it, I found my notes. I looked into the eyes of the guests and I started to read. And everything was going just fine, and then it happened. A gust of wind came along and folded my papers in half. I had to stop, find my place again, and start over. And before I completed my toast, that happened 5 more times. I was so embarrassed. I was humiliated. I felt about as tall as I was back in the 3rd grade. I handed the disc jockey the microphone and I walked to a darkened area at the back of the property because I wanted to be alone with my pain and my shame. And with tears coming down my face, I made a commitment to myself. I said, I am never, ever going to let that happen again. I'm joining Toastmasters. Fellow Toastmasters, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before the pain of remaining the same is too great and it propels you to face your greatest fears. That was my moment. That was my rock bottom. 3 weeks later, I walked through the doors of Unity Speakers and I joined. And I'm happy to tell you that this story has a happy ending. As I started doing the work and becoming a Toastmaster and getting up here and facing my greatest fear, I made a discovery. I didn't have a defective brain. I was experiencing a situation, a condition known as fight or flight. We learned about it back when we were in grade school. And what happens when we are in a state of high anxiety, like we might be when we're facing a lion and have to make a decision if we're going to fight or if we're going to run away, fight or flight. What happens is that our brain prepares for those situations. And what happens is it will shut down all non-essential brain function that's not related to survival. And when you're running from a lion, you don't need your memory. Fellow Toastmasters, that's what we do here in Toastmasters. We learn to lower our anxiety level. As we become more confident and more competent, our anxiety level goes down, and we're able to retain our memory. We're able to do things that we never dreamed that we could possibly do. And I'm happy to say, as a result of Toastmasters, and realizing that I no longer have to live with that belief that I have a defective brain, I'm now doing things I have never believed that I could do. That's the promise for you, fellow Toastmasters. If you have a fear of public speaking, and I think most of us do, come here because of that. You can overcome that fear. You have to sometimes face your rock bottom and face those greatest fears. That's what we do here. It's a safe place to do it. Don't allow your fear of public speaking to stop you from what you want. Don't be like I did and live my life with the belief that I had a defective brain. Get out, face your fear,